When the words are spoken, the room doesn't blow up. There is no dramatic buildup, no music, no laughs, and freezes. It's merely a sentence that hits the ground so forcefully that the surrounding air seems to evaporate. I do indeed have HIV. It's what admirers say about it. It came out spontaneously, rather than as a well-planned confession or a remark meant to make headlines, where feelings were already too intense to manage. Clips begin to circulate, reaction channels pause, and comment sections overflow in a matter of minutes. People just know that something has changed, not even what they just heard. Additionally, it seems irrevocable because another wave appears practically instantly after. People start claiming that this was not at all a medical admission, that nothing was being quietly confirmed by Tamar Braxton. She was responding, reacting to social media, blogs, and days of whispers, mercilessly dragging her name, body, past, and suffering through times. The same question is repeatedly posed by fans. Did she really mean it, or did she just lose her temper? Online sources said that Tamar had been forced into a corner. People were already discussing, making decisions, and labeling her everywhere she looked. Funky DeNova was the one who initially brought up the purported relationship between Tamar and Mendeecees, so he was at the center of those discussions. At that point, the story takes a more sinister turn. The emotional response suddenly intensifies into something more explosive. Tamar is reportedly so upset and enraged that he doesn't only react to the rumors. She presses herself against them. She says what everyone is already accusing her of because she is sick of defending herself, not because it is true. And then there's the charge that shocks everyone on the internet. She supposedly claims that Mendeecees ruined her life, that their relationship wasn't reciprocal, that boundaries were broken, that force was used, and she feels he deserves all the penalties he is currently suffering, including silence, legal issues, and talk of an arrest. Fans are unsure on what to think about first. The accusation of HIV, the anger behind it, or the way the blame changes so quickly, it's like witnessing a break. Blogs refer to it as a breakdown. Supporters refer to it as pain spilling over. It is criticized for being careless. However, one thing is universally acknowledged. This isn't merely rumors. This seems to be a time when feelings take precedence over caution, and the consequences haven't even started yet. The response doesn't happen all at once. Like shock radiating outward from a source, it spreads in layers. One sentence that was never intended to be permanent. What fans start to piece together is a moment rather than a confession. According to circulating sources, it was a time when pressure, rage, shame, and tiredness collided in public. The days preceding that moment were already stressful. Tamar has been at the center of discussions that she didn't initiate. Health-related rumors, conjecture regarding her personal life, and presumptions presented as fact. And regardless of how long she stayed silent, the noise increased rather than decreased. Friends were the first to notice the change. No one responded to the messages. There were fewer phone calls. People were accustomed to her kind of humor. The voice sounded weaker, strained, and nearly brittle. The breaking point, according to many close to her, wasn't a single headline. The pileup was the cause. Blog entries that use the same words repeatedly. Her name becomes a diagnosis in comment sections. Her body was being debated by strangers as if it were public property. The idea that this story had a source, that someone had unlocked a door that could not be shut online, hovered over everything. Many refer to Funky because of his earlier remarks about Tamar and Mendeecees, which established a framework that people could connect anything to, rather than because he made medical claims. Fans claim that everything else happened once the subject of an affair came up. Moral conclusions, character assessments, and health rumors. All of a sudden, Tamar wasn't only being spoken about, they were dissecting her. What followed, according to her supporters, wasn't strategy. Overload was the cause. They claim that Tamar did not make an announcement when she allegedly said, "Yes, I'm HIV positive." It was giving up. There was a moment when she stopped resisting the labels that were thrust upon her and angrily echoed them back, practically challenging the internet to see how cruel it sounded. Others understand it differently. In a different way, such words, according to critics, don't exist in a vacuum. That expressing them, even on an emotional level, invites unavoidable repercussions. However, even detractors admit that the atmosphere was important. The pressure was important. It mattered how rumors were allowed to spread unchecked. As the narrative develops in the reports, a second, far more explosive accusation is revealed. Tamar supposedly switches her attention from defending herself to accusing Mendeecees during the same emotional tempest. He allegedly destroyed her life. According to her, that what transpired between them was more sinister than just a poor choice or an untidy circumstance. Something she claims she didn't select. Something that made her feel angry, helpless, and violated. This, according to supporters, explains why she reacted so strongly. They contend that control erodes when pain and public humiliation combine. The mind ceases to filter. Pain is the first to speak. Tamar is said to make connections in that pain that had been gradually developing for months. The buzz about Mendeecees' arrest, the hush, the rumors. According to reports, she presents it as a consequence rather than a coincidence. Online rumors indicate that she believes Mendeecees should be imprisoned, that justice is being served, and that any legal issues he is facing are justified. Fans claim that these remarks weren't planned, they were unadulterated, speaking from someone who thought her name had already been dragged through every hellish scenario imaginable. Thus, nothing remained to defend. The story breaks apart once more at this point. Some viewers immediately support her. They claim that emotional outbursts are not spontaneous. They claim that unless they were in excruciating pain, no one would invite this degree of examination. They contend that this was a woman's reaction, rather than manipulation, citing her past, fragility, and candor regarding mental health. Others shudder. They caution that such grave claims require proof. They claim that feelings do not justify consequences that have the potential to end lives. They fear that the truth may become collateral damage in the tumult. Then there are people who are trapped in the middle, people who are unable to ignore the pattern but are unsure about what to think, because Tamar's purported words aren't the only thing that sticks out. It's how quickly the what it meant was determined by the internet. Headlines solidify in a matter of hours. Reaction videos remove context. Without hesitation, phrases are polished, condensed, and republished. The sentimental moment turns into a declaration. It turns into a claim. The assertion turns into believed to be true. Suddenly, Tamara is no longer responding to rumors. The rumor is her. According to reports, her close friends attempt to intervene. They compel, they advise, taking a step back, breathing, and clarifying. However, the equipment is already operating. Silence that is ivory is seen as confirmation. Every delay leads to mistrust. De-escalation attempts are interpreted as damage control. Funky, meantime, turns into a lightning rod once more. His role is disputed by fans. He is blamed by some for starting the narrative. Some defend him by claiming he never brought up crimes or health. They draw attention to the fact that he discussed what he observed rather than his diagnosis. However, the internet does not distinguish between causes and results. Funky, who spoke initially, is still in the line of fire as it searches for someone to target. Tension radiates outward. Comment sections become battlefields. People quarrel over responsibility, permission, accountability. If it would have been better to remain silent, and whether it is ever safe to express emotions in a society that makes anger profitable. The lack of clarity is what makes things more difficult. No formal declarations, no affirmations, no clear retreat or reaffirmation, just bits, just feelings. People use their own presumptions and concerns to fill in the blanks. Supporters claim that Tamar's outburst was precisely because without her, the story would proceed regardless of what she did. This, according to critics, is why moderation is important. Because once words are said, you have no control over how they are used while the cacophony persists. Everyone who is viewing can see one thing. Whether or not the rumors are accurate is no longer relevant in this situation. It's about what occurs when someone reacts without armor because they feel like they are being pursued by rumors. It concerns the speed at which suffering can be transformed into a story and the ease with which that story can elude the individual at its core. Nothing seems to be resolved by the time this period ends. There are only positions, no facts, and only emotions. There are no answers. No one appears to be able to get away from the silent, unnerving question that looms over everything. What happens when feelings become public? After the first wave, the focus doesn't subside. It gets sharper. What comes next is amplification rather than resolution. Each video is slowed down. Every word is repeated. Fans begin to view emotion as intent, tone as proof, and pauses as admissions. Additionally, the participants get quieter the louder the dispute gets. People close to her, as reported by online sources, claim she was overwhelmed by how quickly the moment escaped her control. According to reports that are making the rounds on social media and in discussion areas, anger was abruptly frozen, quoted, and transformed into something lasting. They asserted that she had no intention of verifying any diagnosis. However, the internet had already made its decision by the time that distinction became significant. The expression was cut, the context was removed, and the emotion was condensed into a headline. At this point, the discussion moves from what was stated to the reasons behind it. Commentators start characterizing the event as an emotional collapse brought on by persistent targeting. They note that Tamar's name had been trending for days, along with terms about herself that she never used in public. Moral judgments, health rumors, and insinuations presented as worries. Advocates contend that when someone is taught who they were, or others strongly disagree with the interpretation. Finally, breaking and repeating it back only to end the commotion. They contend that prominent figures are aware of the consequences of their remarks, that even emotional responses carry responsibility, and that spreading a rumor gives it more traction. These discussions become personal rather than merely theoretical. Individuals accuse one another of exaggerating injury or downplaying trauma. The emphasis shifts from comprehending to taking sides. The charges made against males take on a life of their own amid all of this. According to reports, Tamar's rage extended beyond self-defense. It overflowed. She allegedly framed him as the cause of her suffering, as well as a part of a complex situation. Words like "destroyed my life" start to circulate. The most grave assertion of all then comes out, not as an official accusation, but rather as something spoken in anger, which is not stated as fact, but rather suggested by emotion. This is the point at which fear enters the conversation. Fans start questioning whether saying something out of rage may still damage someone's reputation, and whether emotional outbursts can have legal ramifications. If implication is sufficient on its own to cause permanent harm. Regarding the distinction between trauma speaking and accusation formation, many debate purpose versus impact. Pain, according to Tamar's supporters, doesn't follow prescriptions. They claim that if she reacted the way she did, there was a serious problem. They contend that survivors don't always talk with clarity, precision, or because it is unfair and impossible to expect someone who is experiencing harm to remain calm. Others make the opposite claim. They caution that accusations of force, even if they are implied, necessitate clarification. Evidence cannot be replaced by emotive framing. They claim that once terms like those are out, they cannot be reversed by subsequent clarifications. Additionally, they fear that if one person's suffering is defended, another person's life may be destroyed without due process. The online course doesn't wait for responses. Arrest rumors about Mendeecees are resurfacing with new vigor as these interpretations gain traction. The emotional allegation feeds old rumors, not new knowledge. People start piecing together timelines, previous news stories, outdated court cases, and unconnected incidents. Everything becomes a part of an expanding idea that, despite its lack of confirmation, feels cohesive. This is how conjecture solidifies. The arrest, according to some users, proves something. Others note that no details line up. There are no charges that correspond to the indicated claims. The connections the internet is making are not supported by established sources. However, narrative is more powerful than reason. Additionally, the story now benefits from stillness, accusation, and emotion. Funky's name, meanwhile, still looms over everything like an unanswered question. Whether he is accountable for what transpired is a topic of discussion in the comment sections. He spoke about what he saw, not what he assumed. According to his supporters, they contend that it is unjust to hold him responsible for how others extrapolated. Speaking at all, according to his detractors, sparked the internet's inevitable escalation once he brought up proximity dynamics and discomfort. Commentary snippets that are making the rounds claim that Funky himself does not leap back in right now. He doesn't go into great detail to explain or defend, and his restraint is seen in several ways. It's considered maturity by some. Some perceive it as guilt. Once more, silence may be anything the audience wants it to be. Fans conjecture behind closed doors about damage control, solicitors recommending silence, and networks keeping a careful eye. There are rumors of meetings, off-camera chats, and people deciding not to fuel an already uncontrollable situation. Although none of this is verified, the idea that something is being controlled behind closed doors quickly gains traction. The way viewers read everything is altered by this belief. Some perceive what appeared to be chaos as intentional. They start inquiring as to whether the quiet is deliberate and whether remarks are being withheld to prevent escalation, regardless of whether each word is evaluated for risk rather than truth. Some people completely disagree with the framing. They contend that this was not planned, that emotional breakdown is not self-organizing. What people are witnessing is only the result of a collision between personal suffering and public desire. The story doesn't go away as the days go by. S is muted by it. New videos offer fresh perspectives rather than fresh facts. Response to response. Views on opinions. People's current feelings about it take precedence over the initial moment. For some, Tamar becomes a symbol. For others, it serves as a warning. Mendeecees turns into a question mark, encircled by conjecture. Funky starts to serve as a benchmark. On nobody is in agreement, and there is still no clarity in any of this. There is no visible medical validation. There are no visible legal documents. The conflicts cannot be resolved by a single, conclusive statement. Instead, there is a growing perception that this issue has reached a point where fixing it is no longer easy. Explanations will have to contend with a story that has already been solidified by repetition, even if they come later. Once anything is framed emotionally, followers start to recognize this silent danger. The internet doesn't need evidence to convince people that pain, whether actual or imagined, serves as a reason for belief. And once a conviction is formed, it is difficult to undo. By the time this stage ends, the narrative no longer focuses on Tamar's intentions or the real events. It now focuses on the repercussions. The speed with which a situation can spiral out of control, and the ease with which intention can be forgotten once an emotion is made public. The most worrisome aspect is not that people don't agree, but rather that nobody feels certain that this can be reversed. Something more complex starts to emerge as the discussion gets deeper. Whether Tamar misspoke or whether the internet overreacted is no longer the main point of contention. It turns into how rapidly moral judgments are formed from emotional narratives, and how those judgments begin to rewrite roles before anybody has an opportunity to react. Those who have followed Tamar for years claim that her response wasn't unexpected. They highlight her past candor regarding suffering, betrayal, and vulnerability. They contend that when a person spends a significant portion of their life in public, the need to continually defend, explain, and clarify finally becomes intolerable. Supporters assert that her verbal outburst was motivated by fatigue rather than facts. Fatigue from being discussed rather than addressed. Others have quite diverse interpretations of this same occasion. They contend that careless implication is not justified by emotional transparency. Those statements that, even inadvertently, carry the burden of criminal implication require caution. Another wave of content is fueled by this conflict of interpretations. Videos that examine strands of body language analyzing tone clips at a slower pace in order to get meaning from breath and pause. Without a trial, the internet starts to function as a jury. As this progresses, the purported accusations made against Mendeecees become increasingly skewed with each recounting. Some interpret what began as an emotional outpouring as a charge of force, while others interpret it as a metaphor for betrayal. Because of the ambiguity, each group can mold the narrative to suit their own views. This is the point at which curiosity begins to give way to terror. Once dramatic viewers are now concerned about actual repercussions, reputations, careers, and families. Even if there is no proof, they start questioning whether someone can ever get beyond being connected to such implications. They inquire whether popular compassion may covertly serve as a verdict. Some voices try to slow down the story in response. They warn viewers that reports are based. Every quiet moment grows louder than words. Every delay leads to mistrust. People start giving abstinence significance. Tamar doesn't explain. Therefore, it must be deliberate. Mendeecees must be strategic if he stays silent. It must be avoidance if Funky doesn't say anything. There are no longer any neutral options. Fans start putting intent onto all parties involved at this point. Some contend that Tamar refrained from speaking after realizing her remarks had gone too far. Others think she didn't say anything because she was told to. Some believe she remained silent because she was offended by the way the internet turned her suffering into a show. Every explanation reveals more about the person giving it than it does about Tamar. Mendeecees follows the same trend. Some interpret silence as guilt, others as legal prudence, detractors as apathy, and supporters as protection. Without the truth, perception keeps growing, even while it is still unknown, constructing without it. In the meantime, Funky's earlier comments is frequently brought up again in the discussion, not as fresh facts, but rather as background that people are now reinterpreting in a more negative light. Things that were once thought to be observational are now considered to be foreshadowing. It frames his unease as a warning. His self-control is presented as withholding information. Fans retaliate. They contend that this is unjust. Funky talked about the dynamics he saw, not imagined crimes. They remind viewers that he repeatedly stated he was unsure of what occurred and declined to conjecture. But once more, intent is at odds with result. It becomes evident that discipline is not rewarded on the internet. Certainty is rewarded. As the days pass, the situation's emotional impact starts to influence how individuals discuss accountability. Despite this, some fans contend that Tamar of suffering, she ought to be more explicit in order to avoid injury. Some contend that asking someone who is upset for clarification is another way to put pressure on them. Both parties think they are defending something significant. Truth is given priority by one, while empathy is given priority by the other. This gap turns into a personal one. Arguments get more heated. Individuals accuse one another of encouraging defamation or silencing survivors. The necessity to adopt a position causes nuance to crumble. A rising realization that the story has gotten out of hand is the driving force behind all of